I think pre-K is extremely important. I know when I was teaching in Paterson, New Jersey, we had a very strong pre-K program, and I could tell the difference between the children that had the pre-K program and did not have it. So I believe financially we need to put resources at the early end, because by doing so, we help children achieve much greater at the tail end. So I believe that early childhood education is critical to ensuring children can reach their fullest potential. And I think we need to look at the budget and make sure that we can achieve that goal of providing that service to preschool children.
He's making me look like such a slacker sitting here. I think I better stand up. I started out as a preschool teacher. I did family daycare in my home, and then I worked at a large center, and then I ran a nursery school and a church for several years. So early childhood is near and dear to my heart. I also started a college program, an entire specialization in early childhood, a master's program. I love early childhood because of what it can really do. If you get it right in the early years, you prevent a lot of problems later on. You don't just prevent the problems of students having trouble reading in 3rd grade and 4th grade. There is research that shows that that early information sticks for many years. Now the Head Start studies show that it just goes to 4th grade, but there are other studies that show it goes beyond. And I think what's really important is that we as a community not only have to recognize that importance, but we have to actively work against those people who are betting against our kids. When we find out prisons are building based on 3rd grade reading scores, we have a moral obligation to fight that and fight it very actively.
When it comes to discipline, it has been statistically proven that there is disproportionate minority contact. What can or will you do to prevent the schoolhouse to jailhouse track for minority students, especially those of African descent? Starting with you. Oh,
my turn. See, we've done this enough that we know we started it. You know, since there's only 2 weeks left, I think it would be funny if somebody did. You're not timing, are you? I think it would be funny if somebody did a forum where I had to speak for him and he had to speak for me, because we could probably do that right now. Oh, okay. So what was the question?
When it comes to discipline.
Oh, yeah, the overrepresentation of blacks and minorities in discipline, suspensions, expulsions, and it's primarily black males. We all know that. We have to address that, and we have to do something about it. There are several things that we need to do. We have to make sure that our teachers have the cultural competencies they need, that they're able to identify and recognize individual racism, but maybe even more importantly, institutional racism. Because sometimes institutional racism is what we miss, because people say, oh, I'm not a racist, I'm good in my heart, but they don't realize that some of the broader actions and some of their habits are racist. And then I think that the other thing that we have to make sure we do is bring in community, bring in people who the kids can relate to when we're not sure about something, or if we see that we are having a problem. Because we want to make sure that if we are not getting something right, that we're not just talking to each other as a school board or talking to each other as a district, that we're reaching out into the community and saying, we have a problem, we need your help, we need your advice.
I think probably, and my opponent stated some really good things, but I think the key when we talk about sensitivity is helping staff take situations and make them less than what they are. Too often, staff can escalate problems, and I think it's important for us, and I know that at the schools that I served as principal, one of the things that we look at is when there's a situation with children, how do you de-escalate? And I think that that's a key, because too often children are backed into a corner and it creates a mountain out of that molehill. So one of the things is sensitivity to how do you de-escalate issues as opposed to escalating. And that would deal with getting rid of a lot of the issues that happen to come up.
Are there programs in place to deal with training for sensitivity and recognizing how to de-escalate those situations later on?
I can't speak for what's going on currently with the district. I know that when I was working in the district, we did have a lot of programs that talked to that and gave training in that area. Sometimes I think one of the issues that the district is not looking at closely enough is that affective part of education, dealing with the child as a person. So I know back in the 80s and 90s, we did a lot of that training. I don't know that that training is being done as much as it had been done in the past. And I really think that that's a key issue.
Do you want me to address that?
I'm sorry?
I didn't know.
Would you like to respond as well?
Yeah, I don't know that I would add that much more. I agree with Mr. Murgio. But we have to make sure that we're very current, because research is always changing as to the best way to train teachers. So we have to make sure that we're current. And we have to make sure that we're balancing things again, because sometimes in an effort to make sure that we're meeting kids where they're at, we can become racist in how we do that. And so we have to get back to that very idea of being respectful to kids. That's how you de-escalate. And making sure that we're looking at each child as an individual and not what that child is representing, whether it's a neighborhood or a family or a race or whatever.
Thank you. Mr. Murgio, do you support the Homestead Amendment? If so, how will you propose revenue to offset losses, or will you propose other budget cuts?
As far as the one that's on the
Yes.
no, at this point, I don't know that I support that, because what that ends up doing is pushing, because we still have to have the same revenue to run the county school district. So what that does is shifts it from one group to another group. So I think the important thing with regards to revenue is, how do we get the most out of the dollars that we have? And I think that that's critical, that we look at what functions are critical and which ones are not critical, and take those critical functions and defund them or reduce the funding so we can put the money into the school centers, because that's where it's all happening.
I have to agree, and I also have to come clean and say that my knowledge of the amendments is about this deep. I'm getting my absentee ballot next week or a couple days, and that's when I'm going to really roll up my sleeves. So some of you may have more information about those amendments than I do. As they've been explained to me, as I've read through them, as I've listened to people in forums, I would have to say that I agree with Mr. Murgio. I don't think that I'm supportive, but at the same time, I'm a scholar, I'm a professor, and I get really sensitive when I feel I don't have the deep knowledge that I should have on some issues.
The next question that I have is, what are your views on high-stakes standardized testing?
I think it's my turn now. Up and down, up and down. I am in favor of high-stakes measurement. I think that we have to be careful when we're talking about testing, because when we say testing, people right away will jump to the FCAT, and we all know that there are a lot of problems with the FCAT. But we have to measure our children because we care about them. That's why we measure their physical health and their growth. So we have to measure. When we talk about high stakes, it's really important that we have a common understanding of what high stakes means. The opposite of high stakes is social promotion. High stakes means that we're going to stop kids at a particular point and say, you haven't learned what you need to learn at this grade, so we can't let you go on. The reason I support that is if you don't stop kids, for instance, in 3rd and 4th grade because they can't read and write, before you know it, you have a 7th grader who can't read and write. And then they have trouble with other subjects. That's how we get ourselves into the fraudulent situation of handing diplomas to kids who can't get a job or get into college and who can't survive. And when I say fraudulent, I think it's a societal fraud to hand somebody a diploma and say they're ready for the world if we haven't made sure they are.
I want to take high-stakes testing to a different place. I think all of us in our current board realize that the FCAT is not doing any good for any child in Palm Beach County or in Florida. However, I will say this, at Inlet Grove High School, as principal there, we probably did more high-stakes testing than anyone else per student. But let me tell you why. Because all of our students at Inlet Grove High School, besides having a high school diploma, come out of school with either state, national, or industry certification. To get that certification, you have to pass a high-stakes test, because if you don't pass it, you don't get the certification. So high-stakes testing in and of itself is not necessarily negative. It's what are we doing with it? How are we using it? If we use it properly, there's nothing wrong with it. No different than our children at Inlet Grove that take the LPN exam. They have to pass the high-stakes LPN test to be a licensed practical nurse right out of high school. I don't know about you, but I don't want somebody giving me an injection that can't pass that test.
Mr. Mergio, what will your budget allocation strategies be in terms of ratio of personnel costs to administrative costs?
Great question. And I see Dr. Robinson is here, so she may want to hit me or whatever, I don't know. But I have to be quite honest. I am a school-based person. I believe the funds need to be at the school center. As a principal, I felt that I could manage what I needed to if I had the funds.